Attractive teachers. Did you know which students had a crush on you? And what is the strangest or most inappropriate thing you overheard said about you? Story 1. Not a very lewd story, sorry, but an actual experience, and I suppose an actual answer to the question. I'm in my mid-20s and am currently finishing up my education to become a teacher at what would be the equivalent of high school level in the US. However, over the course of my studies, I've had to teach a bunch of usually supervised classes. My subjects are computer sciences and history. About 2 years ago, taught a class in computer sciences. Very basic stuff, not really what I want to be teaching, but I guess someone has to do it. So this class was split into 2 groups, which I taught separately on different days. The groups should have been split randomly, but by sheer chance, one group was 100% girls only, and the other was one predominantly male. I taught the same classes to both of these groups, mind you. Exactly the same stuff, same worksheets, etc., etc. Those kids were a bunch of teenagers around the age of 15, maybe 16. Now, remember distinctly how surprised I was at the different outcomes for these 2 groups. Stereotypically, girls have a harder time with computer sciences. I don't mean this in a sexist way. In fact, I would see this as a result of a sexist society. But usually, the boys pick up on some things faster. Not in this case. The girl-only part of the class was freaking focused to a point where I couldn't even provide enough worksheets to fill the lesson. What I remember the most about it was how they listened to everything I said. That's not something you're used to. Usually, you just hope that like 25% of what you said somehow finds its way into their minds. But these girls picked up on everything said, asked questions, and seemed really interested in the subject. So I told a couple of female friends of mine about this. I was praising this class. Isn't this great? This just smashes the stereotypical way of thinking. This is what happens when you give female students a chance to excel in something that our society doesn't usually associate with women, blah blah blah. All of these female friends looked at me at once and went, "Dude, they're into you. You're a 24-year-old decent-looking substitute teacher. You're the dream." I wouldn't have any of that. Surely a bunch of 15-year-old girls couldn't be interested in a teacher almost a decade older than them. Well, all of that got crushed when finished the last lesson that I taught in that class. When I was packing my things, a group of these girls walked over to my desk and sheepishly asked what I was doing after school and whether I would come back to their school at any time. The disappointment when I told them that probably won't come back wasn't the kind of disappointment you get when the students really enjoyed your class. It was the disappointment of teenage girls with a crush. On the plus side, my supervisor gave me stellar feedback on those lessons. Told me he never saw the class this engaged. Did the supervisor not pick up on this? It seems like only all the women seem to know what the real deal is here. At least this guy didn't end up as one of those articles you read in a newspaper about inappropriate relationships. I wonder if this teacher used this knowledge to his advantage in any classes he taught later on. Story 2. When I was around 25, I used to substitute, and it was mainly at a pretty affluent high school where girls would come by my room between classes just to hang around and talk. Then there was the girl who wanted me to read her poetry. The funniest was the drama class I subbed for, where they didn't even try to be subtle. It was a dry, loosey-goosey class anyway, in the school's theater. There were 3 girls who were crowded around me the whole class and were asking for my phone number and my address because they wanted to come hang out. I told them we couldn't. One day I was at the mall with a buddy of mine and a group of high school girls saw me and came running up to me, kinda hanging on and around me and talking. My friend shot me a look. I mouthed a silent, "I swear I haven't touched them." I met a guy around that time, he was kind of a jerk, who was bragging about secretly dating a high school girl from that school. He was mid to late 20s. When he found out I subbed there, he said, "Oh, you're the substitute with a goatee they're always talking about. You're kind of a legend with those girls. You should hook up with some." I soon decided to stop substituting. Woo! That sounds like he avoided a big old mess of trouble right there. I'm glad that so far everyone in these stories is acting appropriately. Do you think any of the further stories are gonna end up with like jail time or court cases? I guess we'll just have to listen on and figure out. Story 3. I'm a 27-year-old theater teacher. I didn't overhear anything, but I've been hit on by students. One girl who likes horses, 17. Did you know that girls who ride horses are better at spicy time? My reaction? Wow, 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 wow. You crossed the line here. It was the first time something like that happened, and I had no idea how to react. So I've been violent and may have hurt her feelings, but well. Last year, another kid, 17 also. We're doing an exercise where each student has to walk in front of the others, and then the others have to try to copy them. It's her turn to walk. You like to watch me walk, sir? She later on asked me if I had a girlfriend and tried multiple times to flirt with me. I usually just said something simple and funny in the context that made her stop for a little time. She definitely stopped after a few months when she finally understood she had no impact on me. The same year, there was also this student that so obviously had a crush on me, but never did or said anything in that direction. It was more of a general behavior. Once, another student mentioned it during a class in an attempt to shame her, and I had to shut him off. I also work with adults, but it's a lot easier to deal with, as they're adults and often compartment things better, so I never have to deal with anything like that. Yet. And here we are, 3 for 3. Another teacher that manages to get the right responses. And what is with all these girls being so brazen and open? If this was guys hitting on a female teacher, they would have been in the principal's office or something worse much, much quicker. Story 4. Male teacher here. I've had a number of students who I've found out had crushes on me. They're usually the ones who find any reason possible to be around you. But on top of that, I've had some more obvious signs. One girl ran into class and jumped into my lap while I sat behind my desk and nestled down a bit. I'm not allowed to touch students, so I had to get 2 other students to remove her. Another girl would make a Hago face at me every day for about a week and asked if I liked it. I had no idea what it meant at the time, so I asked, and she made a self-stimulating gesture with her hand. Another girl wore a ring around school and told people she was married. Those were the worst, but there are usually a handful of them every year. I make it a point to look unkempt now, as it's super dangerous getting into these situations. I also try to have the students move to another class if possible. Most people think I should be flattered by it, but all I can think about is losing my job and being labeled a child pervert. Story 5. When I was in high school, one of my friends said how he would bang the hell out of Ms. Richards and how he wondered how big her chest was. There were 3 Ms. Richards at my school, so before you go all, he used her name, you would never know which one, even if you knew where I went to school. Well, Ms. Richards was standing about 2 feet behind him when he said this. She let it pass, but clearly heard it, and she blushed a little and went back to her desk. The next year, we were handing in our geography finals, and she said, "I hope you do well next year," to my friend, and gave him a piece of paper along with a report card that would only be altered by the test we just took. The note read 34D. He looked at her and she was smiling ear to ear. He went blood red and walked out of the room. He never did anything with her. It was just awesome. She did have sweet ones. Story 6. I have a student who won't leave me alone. He's in my room every chance he gets, even so far as getting to school an hour and a half early to wait outside of my classroom. While I'm in meetings in the morning, he's pacing outside the room waiting for the meeting to end. When I have midday meetings, he's waiting at my classroom begging me to skip them or bring him with me. I have no privacy. This is my 2nd year, and I decided to be casually out with my students. And I was hoping the fact that I'm a lesbian would shut him down at least a little, but either he hasn't noticed or he won't accept it. Unfortunately, guys aren't turned off by the lesbian thing. For some reason, it doesn't mean anything to their possibility of not being involved. They think they're the only exception to this girl's preference for partners. In a way, you have to admire the male ego for this kind of thinking. Story 7. Wholesome sharing. I teach 6 to 8-year-olds. So this is a very safe for work story. One of my students, who was a boy, would always stare at my face, then squeeze my cheeks and lay his face on my arm because I was cute. He also showers me with compliments, and whenever I have makeup on, he would say I look like a celebrity. Of course, at that age, they do not have the concept of crush yet, but still. The thought that a kid finds me good looking is still a confidence boost because at least someone finds me cute. Story 8. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I had a massive crush on one of my high school teachers, and I'm sure he knew. I was always finding excuses to hang around his classroom and talk to him. I wasn't the only one either. There were a handful of girls and a couple of guys who would all spend our spare time in his vicinity. Looking back now, it was so obvious and weird that I did it, but he was my first serious crush and I had zero chill. I visited every now and then when I'd go home from college, and we're still friends on Facebook still. And he's also still super handsome and a genuinely nice dude. Story 9. I have a student with a crush on me. I was in my late 20s teaching seniors in high school. He constantly emailed me with questions about college applications and stuff, but sometimes his friends would hack his account and send me emails from his account saying how much he loved me. I responded and said I cared about him, but only as a student. After he graduated high school, he would email me when he was drunk saying he loved me, and then he would follow up the next morning saying he never meant to send that. I didn't really respond to those. When he graduated college, he did try to ask me out for reals, and I turned him down again, politely. Was this teacher in a relationship? And how much of a crush did this student have to wait through high school and college? Did this kid ever date during that time? And if he did, what was wrong with the other girls he dated? Story 10. There is a nonverbal, very large, severely autistic young man at my school who goes into a rage and attacks other teachers and students and flips tables and desks if I'm not where I'm supposed to be when he wants me to be. I think maybe I remind him of someone else. I'm a middle-aged woman with kids older than he is. He badly injured a teacher last week when I had a meeting and was not at lunch. He stares at me from across the cafeteria or gym and looks away smiling each time I look over. I am not his teacher, and he doesn't react this way to anyone else at the school. Story 11. In my first year of teaching, I taught in a rural high school. Almost everyone worked on a farm. These are two statements from the same student. After explaining to a class all the different kinds of food I could cook, I was 23 at the time, a student said, "How come you ain't married then?" This one was just randomly, "Miss, you're way too pretty to not have a boyfriend." The kid was literally working on an assignment and just blurted this out. Story 12. I am a student and was in my last big teaching session before my finals. After just 1 week of teaching, I landed on an Instagram site where pupils secretly post things they want to confess about them or their teachers. They called me the hottest teacher ever and published my name, surname, and relationship status. That felt pretty strange. One girl said, in my case, she would not have a single problem of me being a child pervert. How old are these kids? Just because they have access to Instagram doesn't mean they're not very young. And did they think they were going to make this person attracted more when they doxed him? I think they have a very different view of privacy than their teacher does. Story 13. I'm a male teacher, and there's one girl who either has daddy issues, I know from her oversharing she has a stepdad, or has a crush on me. She might just be needy, but she is always calling me over to ask for help when she clearly figures it out on her own, or one of her smart friends could help. She's always telling me all the smallest details of her life, much more so than my other students. Like I said, she might just be needy, but I don't know. Story 14. Obligatory, not a teacher, but my girlfriend is. She absolutely knows which kids have a crush on her, and generally uses it to have them wipe the board and other small stuff. The strangest rumor about her was probably when the kids told her they thought she wasn't going to be here that year because she was pregnant. I'm a woman. If she was, we'd have known. Where this rumor came from, absolutely no idea. Story 15. I dated a girl a few years ago. She's, it seems wrong, a teacher and is insanely gorgeous. Right before she left the country, she started teaching at a high school. Pretty much all of the boys had a crush on her for the first few months she was there. One of them acted really weird with me one of the few times I dropped by to pick her up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when she later joked about it, it was like being hit with a ton of bricks. Maybe this is a harmless crush, but I hope this guy wasn't in any danger from those students. These are kids that are just dealing with these emotions. First crushes and such can be really overwhelming. It might lead to some crazy ideas or actions. I hope nothing came from this. Story 16. I'm not attractive, but I did find out a third grader had a crush on me because she straight up told me. I had suspected it because she would give me a hug basically every time she saw me and say things like, "Mr. Laneyflit is so funny, cool, and handsome." She did go through a phase where she randomly hated me and refused to talk to me most of the time. But then after a couple of weeks of that, she randomly gave me a hug one morning and said, "I like you again." That kid was a crazy little boy. Story 17. Economics teacher here. A year or two back, I had a boy, probably 15 or 16, always on his phone in class. I don't know why, but I always told him to get off of it. Fast forward a few weeks, and I hear him and one of his friends talking about how they were taking pictures of me. Some of them were up my skirt and using them to self-stimulate. The worst part is I couldn't get them out of my class with no proof, so I waited until he started spreading the pictures to get him kicked out. This still haunts me today. Story 18. Back when I was student teaching, I had a male student straight up yell at me in the hall, "I think you're hot." I was in my early 20s and looked younger than that, and not at all confident as a teacher yet, so I was literally speechless. Now I would have enough guts to tell them that's inappropriate, but back then I literally just stood there awkwardly with a "I wish this wasn't happening" look on my face. It's too bad she felt so helpless about all this. These are kids. They're going to be brazen as all hell. Maybe a lot of it is all talk, but you never know. Story 19. I don't think I'm attractive, but I heard some students commenting about my butt a couple of times. Besides that, last semester I was lecturing classical mechanics. I could swear that the boy who always sits in front of my desk stared at my chest every time I was writing something. About 3 weeks ago, I'm not his teacher anymore, he knocked on the door of my lab looking for me. He then asked if I would go on a date with him. I'm a 23-year-old physicist. Story 20. English teacher here. Girls on puberty just seem to want to have a crush on any guy that's somewhat close to them and unreachable for an actual relationship, and a teacher fits it perfectly. Teenagers keep trying to approach physically and use any excuse to hug me, and if they don't set clear limits, they try to touch me. Nothing explicit or really bizarre ever happened to me, but it feels really weird sometimes. Story 21. I know of 2 students who had crushes on me when I did my student teaching. Just avoid the situations. Whenever we talked, I made sure to place myself in clear view of the door, and our individual conversations were always with a desk between us. I was big on making sure every student had a proper handshake and eye contact as a life skill, so I kept hugging out of my classroom. That last sentence was worded a little unusually. It sounded like he was always bringing in huggings in his class, so I kept hugging out of my classroom. Now I realize he was saying he keeps hugging outside of his classroom. Story 22. I'm not particularly attractive, but I'm a young female teacher and my students are teenagers. I have had students make really inappropriate comments before. 2 of my students got in trouble in another class because another teacher heard them having a discussion about my boobs. Hearing that grossed me out and made me want to dress even more modestly than I already do. It's unfortunate she has to have her style of clothing dictated by these 2 chuckleheads. And it's crazy that she said she's already dressed modestly and now she's going to have to dress even more so. That might be easy during the earlier parts of the year. I hope wherever she lives, she doesn't get very hot summers. Story 23. When I was just starting, one of the girls, I was only 4 years older, asked me to feel her abs as she pulled up her shirt. Didn't know what to do, so I just walked out of the room. Not exactly a textbook procedure on how to handle it, but my brain short-circuited for a second. Story 24. Had a student, not underage, ask me out. I was teaching a college class and he asked me to a ball. I told him I planned to take my fiancée. He begged me to dump plans with my fiancée. In the end, he walked away disappointed. Gotta give him points for boldness, I guess. Story 25. A female teacher of mine was told by a student during an exam to sit down because if he sees her body, his blood is rushing in other directions instead of his head.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.